Okay, dynamic. We came here to learn something. I think those of you who were here last year realize that this is a hands-on participation workshop, not a lecture series.
So, two buzzards sitting in a tree. What's the next line? You got it. K-I-S-S-I-N-G. Can you tell I have young kids? Okay. Two buzzards sitting in a tree. A fat, lazy buzzard and a younger, skinnier, hungrier vulture sitting in a tree, sitting in the hot Arizona sun, waiting and waiting and waiting. Finally, the skinny, hungry vulture turns to the fat guy and says, "Wait for something to die? Hell, let's go out and kill something." Now, what I want you to understand is there's actually a reason for that story. And that's this. First of all, the networking lesson you need to learn from that is it's not considered a good thing to be a vulture when you're networking. That's the first thing. The second thing I want you to understand is this. You cannot wait for business to come out to you. You can't wait. But let me tell you another story. When I worked for Verizon, I went down to New York City right after September 11th. That's when right after that, as you recall, after the towers fell, the Verizon building was next to the Twin Towers and it was damaged, and so they sent a whole crew of us down there to help out with those books. And my job was mostly to work with new customers, go out and bring in new customers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I had the pleasure of meeting an individual. His name was Dennis. Didn't have any advertising. We sat down and we talked. And I said to him, "Dennis, if you're going to be effective and if you're going to do this, you've got to be found. You've got to compete under your headings in the yellow pages. You need to have an ad similar to this." And you know what he said to me? He said, "Okay, no problem." Now here's the difference. That ad, as you'll recall, in Western New York was $200, right? Remember that? But in New York City, that same ad was $1,000 per month, $12,000 per year. And you know what he said? "Okay, sign me up." Not only did he sign the contract right then and there, but over the course of the next 3 months that I was down there, he introduced me to 30 individuals who all bought a similar program of roughly $1,000 more per month. So just as I was coming back from New York, I sat down, I took him to dinner. After all, I made a couple dollars off the man, right? So I took him to dinner. And we were talking, and I said, "Dennis, got to be honest with you. In Western New York, where I come from, I have customers that are screaming because their program increased by 25 cents more per month. And yet, you just signed up for a $12,000 program like that just because I said it was going to work. What's up with that?" And you know what he said? He said, "Listen to me, Harry. I'm in New York City. There are a million vultures out there, and if I don't do something different than everybody else, guess what they're going to do? They are going to eat me. I have got to be able to compete." Well, that's pretty interesting because, we are in a recession, so to speak. You've all heard it from your customers. You probably thought it yourself. We are in a recession. But if you listen to what Ivan says, Ivan talks about this. He says that in a recession, only the assertively networked individuals will survive in a recessionary economy. Do you know what that means? Assertively networked individuals. That means you, if you're doing it right. So let's talk about how you can do it right, okay? First thing I want to make sure that you're doing is I want to make sure that you understand that your attitude in this game counts. It counts. Secondly, I want you to understand that in order to be effective and assertively networked, you have got to stand out from the crowd. And thirdly, what I want you to understand is this. You have got to take charge of the game. That's it. That's what Ivan teaches us if you read his books. You have got to take charge of the game. But let's go back and let's talk a little bit about your attitude. And what does that mean? And I want you to understand this, that if you are not willing to do something different, then guess what? You can't expect a different result. You can't. You see, look at your chapters. Think of the networking event you went to. Take, for example, last night. Recognize that your visitors represent an opportunity. But you got to do something different. You've got to seize that opportunity. Because guess what? They're not going to seize it for you. You have to go out and you have to do it. So your attitude affects your income. If you're not networking with those visitors, guess what happens? Nothing, right? Nothing happens. So here's what you can do. At your next event, this is what I want you to do. I want you to change your attitude. You know, Jerry gets the surveys, and Jerry talks to a lot of the visitors that come to your chapter meetings. He talks to those people who come to our events. And you know what they invariably say to him? They invariably will say something along the lines of, you know what? I didn't really feel welcome at that meeting. Now, doesn't that scare you? Shouldn't that scare you? It should. So here's what I want you to do. And I know some of you are sitting there going, yeah, but not at our chapter. Our visitors feel real welcome, right? But I'm going to challenge you that indeed they don't. They don't. And I want to challenge you to do something different. Change your attitude. But recognize again that you've got to take that first step. See, they come into a networking event or they go to one of our socials and they're just standing there waiting because they don't know what to do, but you do know what to do. So here's what I want you to do. When you go into that meeting, I want you to take a deep breath. Take a deep breath. And then I want you to make a concerted effort to introduce to yourself to absolutely every visitor in the room. Now, you've got a chapter of 25 people, right? How would that visitor feel if suddenly 25 people during the course of that open networking or the course of that meeting, how would that visitor feel if 25 people introduced themselves to them? More importantly, how would they feel? And more importantly than that, how would that affect your business? See, attitude counts, right? Here's another thing you can do. I know all of you keep track of the referrals that you get, right? Right? You'll work with me on this. Right? Of course, you all keep track of the referrals you get. But what I want you to do is something different. I want to change your attitude for a second. I want you to start keeping track of the referrals that you give. And I want you to keep track of who you give them to. Because if you're not giving them to everybody, guess what? How effective are you being? How is your attitude changing? You see, recognize B&I is about what? Givers gain, right? So change your attitude and make sure that you are giving more referrals than you're getting. How will that affect your business? You see, attitude, it's a state of mind. Nobody cares, honestly. Nobody cares that your business is in recession. Nobody cares. The only person that really cares is the person who's doing worse off, and he just wants to hear from you that somebody else is doing as bad as he is. That's the only person that cares, all right? So changing your attitude means that you will make more money regardless of the economic factors, okay? So we go back to what Ivan said, which is assertive networking, right? And remember, what your next step then is you've got to stand out from the crowd. See, remember, success is not about fitting in. Success is about standing out. Look at Google, one of the most successful companies in the world, right? They didn't fit in. They found a way to stand out from the crowd. And you've got to do that same thing too. Too many times people will say, well, you know, great customer service. I have great customer service. Recognize that great customer service will reduce negative word of mouth, but it's not going to bring you more business. So standing out from the crowd means that you have got to now become an active listener. Well, what does that mean? An active listener. Well, first of all, I want to make sure that you know how to bring all of the people in your chapter referrals. I want you to know how to bring them up in a conversation. So you've got to have a dance card, and you've got to make sure that you can bring them up in a conversation. And guess what? If you don't know how you can bring them up in conversations, how exactly is that going to affect your business? How is it going to affect their business? So you've got to become an active listener if you're going to stand out from the crowd. Now here's something else you can do. When you go to an event or when you go to a meeting, recognize that you have 3 things you have to do or can do. The first thing is, don't go. That's the first thing you can do, right? Go or not go, right? Here's the second thing you can do. Go and only talk to the people you know. Now, if you want to be assertively networked, then here's what I want you to do. I want you to go, and I want you to bring a prospect or a visitor or a business associate, and I want you to introduce them to people. That's what you can do to stand out from the crowd of what everybody else is doing. Make sure that you're giving more than you're gaining at this point, all right? So take charge of the game. You know, we talked earlier that too many entrepreneurs believe that providing great customer service is going to lead people to flock to the door. And guess what? If you read Ivan's book, you're going to discover that that doesn't really do it. You have to have a powerful message. You're going to hear from one of our authors today, Michelle Donovan. And if you read her book, The 29% Solution, if you read her book in section 5, she talks about you must have a powerful message. Now, what does that mean? Anybody ever play that game with young kids? And that game is Whisper Down the Lane. Anybody ever play that game? Okay, so here's what you do. So I'd whisper a message into his ear, and he whispers it into his ear, to her ear, and it goes all the way around the room. My message goes all the way around the room, and by the time it finally gets to that person in the very back of the room, she stands up, and she has a very convoluted message, doesn't she? Anybody ever play that game? So what if I were to stand up and I were to say this? Let me read it. Hi, my name is John, and I operate a business that brings first-time mothers and newborns together with dogs to help infants and pets adjust to safely living together. What if that was my message? What if I whispered it into his ear and it went around the room, and by the time it got to her back there, she stands up and says, I'd like to introduce you to Joe. He operates on infants who have been attacked by dogs. Now, my question is, how does that affect your message? How does that message affect your business? So you've got to have a powerful message. So how do you do that? Well, here, let's talk about that. We're talking about taking charge of the game, right? So maybe you should practice the 7 Ps. And just so you know, it's not really 7 Ps, it's 8. But it says 7, all right? What are those 7 Ps? Anybody know? Here, I'll read them for you. You don't even have to try. Here, plan it, prepare it, practice it, promote it, present it, promote it again, profit for it, and the last one, which is really the 8th, is publish it. When we're talking about your message, let's start at the very beginning. Let's start planning your message. What does that mean? If you plan your message, that means what is your goal? What are you trying to accomplish by putting that message out there? What is your goal? After you plan it, I want you to prepare it. You know what that means? That means you need to use your training. How you've learned to prepare a 10-minute presentation, how you've learned to prepare a 1-minute infomercial. I want you to prepare for that presentation, all right? And when you finish that, I want you to practice it. And when I say practice it, I don't mean sitting in the car with the dome light on 2 minutes before your presentation. I'm doing this presentation now. Anybody know how many times I've actually gone through this presentation? A whole lot. A whole lot. Okay? So you need to practice it. There's nothing else I could say about that, all right? Then I want you to start promoting it. And you know what promoting it means? That means 6 weeks out, you need to start telling your members who exactly you want to hear, who you want to see in those seats for your meeting. Promote it so that they know how to invite people for you. And now that you've promoted it, guess what? Now you want to make sure that you can present it the way it's supposed to be done. And when I talk about presenting it, I mean I want you to make me want to listen to you. Make me want to listen to you. Don't just stand up and read it. I understand that most of you aren't public speakers, but make me want to listen to you. On Tuesday, I listened to a 10-minute speaker. His name was Richard Bratz right here. He had a great presentation. You know why? Because he got my interest. He obviously planned it. He made me want to listen. And you need to do the same thing too. Because, by the way, it's early in the morning. Who wants to listen unless you make me want to listen to you? So now, after you presented it, I want to make sure that you promote it. And how do you do that? Well, listen, you're walking out, you better make sure you're putting something in their hands after their meeting, a flyer or something so that they remember. Make sure that you are promoting what you just talked about so that they don't walk out and completely forget what it is that you said. And now that you've finished that, let's go to the big one. Let's talk about profiting from your message. Are you tracking the results? Remember when we started up at the top and we said What is your goal? How close to your goal are you coming? You need to make sure that you're presenting your program to hit your goal so you're making a profit. And then, the 8th one, which is really the 7th, right? The 8th one, publish it. Hey, listen, put out a press release about what you just talked about. Aren't you the expert in your business? So you want to make sure that you can publish and you can make sure that everybody else who didn't have the opportunity to hear your presentation, you want to make sure that, guess what? They can hear even though they weren't there. So your message, your powerful message that Michelle talks about is out there, okay? So what we've talked about is a hands-on approach to growing your business. We've talked about a hands-on approach to growing your chapters. We've talked about a hands-on approach to growing your profits. You see, recognize this. The recession is only going to hurt if you choose to participate in it. Okay? So now, let's do this. Let's think back to my story about Dennis. Remember after 9/11? Remember how tourism in New York City was really in the dumps? In fact, most businesses were really in the dumps, and they needed tons of federal aid. Remember all that? Okay. But I was talking to a gentleman who thought nothing about blowing another $12,000 on yellow page advertising simply because some guy said, hey, you should have a big ad. What did he do differently? Well, he adjusted his attitude, didn't he? He took charge, didn't he? He found a way to stand out from his competition, didn't he? What did he do differently? See, he refused to participate in that recession. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to repeat after me. I refuse. No. Say it again. I refuse to participate in the recession. Say it again. I refuse. I refuse to participate in a recession. Say it one more time. I refuse to participate in a recession. Now, you got a button. I know some of you aren't wearing it. Put it on right now. Refuse to participate in a recession because, ladies and gentlemen, it's all about you. Thanks. Have a great day.